Opening credits. Being Desired. Historical Second Chance Romance. By Selina Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Chapter 1. Carla de Benham placed a gentle, elegantly slim hand on her burgeoning stomach and tried to calm the child kicking her from within. The music pouring out of the gramophone did not have its normal soothing effect on the child, and the kicking was becoming painful. The baby seemed to respond to its mother's touch, finally, and settled down just below her ribs. Rolling on her divan slightly, to ease the burden of the child's new position, Carla rested her head on the pillow there and thought about her life up to this point. The memories were not happy ones, but that was the life of a woman whose husband had married her only to produce heirs in 1900 Yorkshire. Happiness was not something she should expect. Carla's husband Henry chose Carla because she apparently looked like a good brood mare. Henry chose a bride from a social gathering of eligible young ladies of the manufacturing elite, the same social strata from which he came. He could have chosen a titled bride, a bride with land or a dowry, but he chose one that looked promising as a producer of children instead. She wasn't the pale blonde English rose he wanted, but she would do despite being 18 years old, 2 years older than he expected and dark-haired. She did have the requisite blues eyes Henry wanted, and that was close enough for him. Henry did not believe in love, only the power of capitalism, and the only emotion he ever showed was anger, a smug gloating, or sometimes an awkward happiness that showed through when his business was doing exceedingly well. Otherwise he was dour, glum, and often brooding. His appearance also left much to be
censored,
as he was portly with a florid face, unkempt hair, and often had a smell of unwashed body polluting the air around him. Carla had accepted Henry's offer of marriage because she needed stability. She was the fifth daughter of a steel magnate, but her father passed away, leaving her mother to care for 9 young children. Carla, being the youngest, had watched as her family's fortunes plummeted and her elder siblings married to attain a better standing in the world. Her mother did not manage the company well, even with a solicitor and advisors there to help her, and Carla's only choice was to also marry. As the daughter of a virtually bankrupt steel production family, Carla did not have many options in suitors. Henry was the only one that asked for her hand in marriage, and though the man was dour, 20 years older than her and unappealing in every way, Carla agreed to his offer in the hope of securing her future. Henry made no bones about his need for children, not that he actually liked children, but they were heirs and he needed heirs. He had no time for a wife, and would twice monthly perform his marital duties to ensure the production of an heir. The marriage had not produced a child 18 months after their wedding, and Henry, being a man who lacked knowledge about science, blamed Carla for their lack of children and soon began muttering about divorce. Henry's temper had also become blacker as the time passed without a child being produced. Carla could do nothing to please him, though she tried, and he drank more each night. He'd begun to come to Carla's room at night, and the things he'd do, alluding to advice he'd received from various sources, demeaned and humiliated Carla. Then he'd begun a campaign of beatings, thinking Carla was willfully defying his wish for children. Desperate and knowing the torment would stop if she produced a child, Carla knew she had to do something, anything to get pregnant. Carla suspected the fault did not lie within her own body, and started to look around for someone discreet, above reproach, and who Henry would not suspect had cuckolded him. Carla decided that the only man suitable for the job was her husband's best friend, Samuel. Samuel was the only man that Carla would ever have an opportunity to sleep with, she quickly figured out. He often stayed overnight at the house, after going out with Henry for the evening. He was known to be a rake with the ladies, and he'd often eyed her with a look that Carla did not quite understand, but knew to be mixed with
censored.
She did not want to break her marriage vows, but desperation had set in, and Samuel appeared to be the only available option. Samuel had never made an untoward advance at Carla, but she suspected if the man was inebriated, she stood a better chance at seducing him, for that is what she was going to have to do. Carla knew Samuel was a lifelong friend of Henry's, and knew that he would never make an advance towards her, so she waited until the men came back after a long night out. She could tell they were both very drunk by the loud, boisterous singing, that Henry only allowed himself when he was drunk, otherwise he'd never partake in such an activity. She heard the men going to their rooms, and waited until she knew Henry was asleep. She then quietly crept to Henry's room and listened at the door. She heard loud snores coming from the room and knew Henry was asleep. Samuel's door also revealed snoring, so she crept in quietly, removed her dressing gown and climbed into bed with the man. She used some of the techniques Henry had insisted she do to him to arouse Samuel, performed the deed, and quietly left the room, hoping that was all it would take. Samuel, for his part, barely seemed conscious throughout the process and had made no mention of it since. She would, however, catch him looking at her in a knowing way sometimes, and that worried her. She'd hoped he'd passed out once it was all done and forgotten the incident, but she was not certain of that at all. Samuel seemed too interested in what was happening with her and the baby for Carla's comfort. Carla was startled from her miserable trip down memory lane when a knock came at the door. Lulled by the music, the hand she used to soothe her baby, and her reverie, the sound startled Carla and she jumped to her feet, looking at the door in surprise. Telling herself she was silly, she walked to the door to find her husband's valet at the door. "Yes, Wilson, what can I do for you?" "Madam, your husband has taken ill and I believe we should call a doctor for him. He's most pained." Wilson spoke with a bland, disinterested tone that belied the seriousness of the matter. If her husband was calling for a doctor, he was truly ill. "Oh? Well, yes, call for the doctor at once, Wilson. I'll go to him now to see if I can comfort him in some way." Carla may not care overmuch for her husband, but she respected his position as her husband. His well-being was in her interest and that of her child's. Her existence depended on his after all. "I'll send someone at once, madam. Do you need anything else from me in the meantime?" Wilson asked. "No, that is all." Carla gathered her skirts and walked down the hall to her husband's room. The room reeked of old body odor, alcoholic sweat and decay. The maids cleaned the room daily, but somehow the smell persisted. Carla suspected it came from Henry himself, and no amount of cleaning would get it out of the mattress, the walls, or the furniture. It was just there, a permanent reminder of Henry's presence after all of these years. Carla saw Henry on his hands and knees in his bedgown hiked up around his hips, and a large red stain marring the pristine whiteness of the bedsheet beneath him. Henry was bleeding from somewhere, but he refused to tell Carla where the blood came from. The doctor soon arrived, a short, bald man filled with self-importance that quickly ushered Carla out of the room, telling her a woman in her delicate condition should not be in the sick room. Carla paced within her own bedchamber, wondering what exactly was happening. She heard a cry from the hall, and quickly left the room to see her mother-in-law, Beatrice de Benham, on the floor sobbing as the doctor tried to get her up and regain her dignity. The little man seemed to have no idea how to speak to women, and Carla marched over, hoping to comfort the woman who had coldly rejected her from the moment Carla met her. She did not care for Beatrice either, but felt it her duty to care for the woman the best she could. Carla looked to the doctor for more information, and the man seemed to shrink within himself under Carla's stare. "Well?" she finally asked. "I'm afraid there was nothing I could do, Mrs. de Benham. Mr. de Benham should have called me much sooner. I may have been able to stop the bleeding, but I was called much too late. He put it off far too long, and the blood loss could not be stopped. I'm afraid your husband has expired, Mrs. de Benham." The doctor quietly walked back into her husband's bedchamber and shut the door. Carla felt like joining Beatrice on the floor, her shock great and unexpected. She had no emotional attachment to Henry, she'd had no tender feelings towards him, but he had provided a home and comforts for her, about all a woman in her position could hope for. Carla herself did not believe in marital love, though she knew familial love existed. She just had no idea how a woman who sold herself to a man for the sake of a home and respectability could come to love a man, especially when that man had subjected the life Henry had subjected Carla to. Her shock was due to her new state, widowhood, and worry for her future and her child's. Henry's family could expel her from the home, cut off her support if he had not provided for her. She clutched her hand to her stomach, hoping that she could protect her child somehow. Reaching down, Carla tried to comfort the sobbing woman with a handkerchief crammed into her mouth, an attempt to hide her sobs Carla suspected, and she tried to lift her. Her attempts at comfort were rebuffed and met with venom. "Don't touch me, wretch. You have brought a curse upon this family. My poor Henry has died in the prime of his life, and now he's dead. You caused this, I know you did. I heard your screams when Henry visited you at night, but knew he was doing his duty. You couldn't even submit, and do it quietly. For now we will support you, at least until your child is born. Then you'll have to go. I don't know how you did this, but you've caused my son to lose his life, and I'll see you on the street for it." Beatrice was shouting by the time she finished, and Carla had backed down the hall as her voice rose. Seeing she was at her door, she hurried through it, her horror at Beatrice's words growing. Carla knew she'd done nothing wrong, but now she had the added worry of being thrown out once her child was born, and knew Beatrice would take the child from her as well. Carla locked her door and ran to her bed, afraid to take her eyes from the door in case Beatrice tried to come through it and spread more of her vile hate. Carla paced the floor, wondering what her husband's solicitor was going to tell her today. The man was currently ensconced in her husband's office, going over a last-minute reading of Henry's will, 2 weeks after he'd been laid to rest. The family was quickly called in soon after, and Carla's fate was revealed. "Mrs. de Benham, your husband has not renewed his will since he was 35 years old, meaning you are not mentioned in it. According to the law, you are entitled to 1/3 of his estate as your dower, but that is all. I understand from the elder Mrs. de Benham, who has been left the entirety of the estate, that you are with child, and she plans to hold the estate until your child reaches their majority, at which time she will transfer ownership to said child. The papers will be drawn up shortly. For now, the family will allow you to remain in the home until such a time as you are relieved of your current state. Then you will be required to leave this home for the country estate of Mr. de Benham, where you will remain unless you should remarry. Those are the wishes of Mrs. de Benham." Carla looked over at Beatrice and knew she'd been beaten, again. Only this time the abuse was not physical. She had to endure the woman's presence because of Henry's thoughtlessness, and would then be banished. Still, it was better than being put out on the street, she supposed. She stood to leave, excusing herself quietly, when Samuel called to her, asking for a moment of her time. Looking at him expectantly, she followed him into the hall, not sure what to expect from the man. She watched the back of his head as she walked, noting once again that Samuel was handsome, tall with silky straight dark brown hair with the same gray-colored eyes as Henry, and a strong chin that frequently displayed his stubborn streak. Carla wondered what he could want with her, and was surprised when Samuel turned to her quickly and spoke to her quietly, but urgently. "Carla, I know your babe is mine. Henry had mumps as a child and would have been made sterile. I told him that before he married you, but he would not listen. He's never listened to me, but what can one do? This travesty of a marriage went on long enough, and now you are free of it. I want you to marry me, so that we can raise our child together as a couple. I want to take you away from the misery of the last few years, and make you smile again. I can remember the first time I saw you, and the smile you wore. That smile soon disappeared, and I have longed to return it to your sweet face, which I love so dearly. Please say you'll be mine." Samuel spoke with a passion he must have hidden for a long time, because Carla had not suspected how deeply his feelings ran. Carla's emotions had run from shock to fear to anger to loneliness, and were now back at shock again. To think Samuel had loved her all of this time, and she'd not known. To think her plight was so apparent was embarrassing, and Carla longed to get away from the man. She also knew that as fraught as her current situation was, she was at last free of a husband. She had no man to direct her to abuse her, and she wanted to revel in that freedom for however long she was allowed it. Propriety also dictated she could not marry so quickly. Society would be shocked if that were to occur. "I can't marry you now, Samuel. We'd be ostracized from society, and I've only just lost my husband. Give me some time to think it over, please?" she implored, attempting to stall an answer. I will give you time, dear lady. I will give you all I can, but I do not want to wait long. I want to be there to cradle my child when it is born, after all," Samuel said with a smile. Carla looked around in case anyone had heard the tale, and stepped closer to Samuel. "No one must ever know this child is yours, Samuel, no one, do you understand me? You would ruin my future, and the future of this child. You must stop speaking of it, I implore you." Carla spoke quietly, but with a passion Samuel had never seen from her before. He agreed and quietly let her leave him to go to her room. Carla kept her back as straight as possible as she walked, hoping no one had heard the exchange who could repeat it. She'd be ruined if anyone found out. A week later, Carla stared at her mother-in-law in absolute horror, as the woman tore Carla's clothes to shreds and shrieked at Carla that she was little more than a whore. The woman was so enraged she was shrieking words Carla had never heard before, but from the way Beatrice was using them, the words must be horrible. Finally, the woman collapsed on a divan and started to speak more quietly to Carla. "Elizabeth Rogers has been to visit me. She's told me of your trysts with Samuel under Henry's nose, in his very home. She's witnessed you leaving the man's room in the middle of the night when she stayed as a houseguest, and she has letters you wrote her detailing your affair with the man. I did not realize the two of you were that close, but apparently you were. Here's a note from your closest friend, apparently with more morals than you, to let Henry's family know of your deceit." Beatrice flung the note at Carla, who caught it without thinking, clenching the sealed letter in her hand without realizing it. "You scheming cow, I always knew you were bad news. You will leave this house at once and take your ill-gotten child with you. That child is no part of this family, and will have no part of Henry's fortune. You will be cut off, and I do not care if you're dead in the street this time next week. Now get out." Beatrice flew at Carla then, aiming a blow at Carla's head. Carla ducked the woman's fists and ran out the door, flinging herself down the stairs and out into the street without her coat, hat, or gloves. It was winter and the air was frigid. Her fright and shock combined to leave her staring at the front door with her mouth hanging open in confusion at what exactly had just happened. Slowly, the feeling of cold crept into her consciousness, and Carla brought her arms up to her.
Censored.
The paper hit her in the face as she pulled her hands up, and Carla looked down at it. She ripped the letter open, hoping to gain some knowledge of recent events, and her shock grew. The woman the letter was from had been Samuel's lover, it said, until just before Carla had become pregnant. Then his attentions had stopped. Elizabeth had gleaned from Samuel's words and his glances at her that he was in love with Carla, and Elizabeth had come to suspect that Carla's child was his. To regain Samuel's attentions, and to get Carla out of the way, Elizabeth had revealed certain information to Beatrice. Carla clutched the letter once again, knowing that whatever she told Beatrice must have been half-truths because she'd only ever visited Samuel once and no other guests had been present, though she and Henry had held house parties before with overnight visitors. Carla looked around her knowing she could not go back inside the house, but not sure where else to go. She'd made no friends she could count on, and most doors would be closed to her once word of this got out. Even within her own family, doors would close in case Carla's taint would somehow bleed over to them. She cast about, trying to think of somewhere to find refuge, and began to walk aimlessly. After 15 minutes, she paused as she realized where her footsteps had led her. She was standing in front of Samuel's townhouse. Glumly, Carla realized that yes, Samuel may very well be her only refuge, the last place she should go to, but the only place where she knew she would be welcomed. Her child would soon be born, and she needed a home. Only one person had offered her that, since her husband's passing. Bracing herself, she walked up to the door and knocked, knowing her future had already been changed, but that it would now change even more drastically. Chapter 2. Carla sat despondently in the room now labeled as her bedchamber, staring out of the window at the snow-filled scene before her. She and Samuel had been married a little over a week now, and she could not bring herself to feel anything but sadness. Her child was due any day now, and all she could think about was leaving, escaping the disaster she herself had created. As soon as the child was born and she'd healed, Carla was leaving and she was going to escape far, far away. She wasn't sure how she was going to do that, but anything was better than being married again, and with a child whose future was precarious. The child would be better off left behind and raised as Samuel's. Her presence would only burden the child with her ruin. Word had spread that Carla had been evicted from her home, but nobody was quite sure why. The rumors were actually worse than the truth, but she could refute none of them. Samuel had quickly taken Carla in, and had insisted they marry within days of her flight to his home. She had agreed, but only in the hopes that this would obligate him to her child. She also knew that if she would not marry him, she could not stay in his home. Carla had wed Samuel, but they had yet to consummate the marriage. She pled the burden of being with child, and Samuel, dear sweet Samuel, had not pressured her about it. Samuel really was sweet, and seemed to truly love Carla. He bought her new clothes, provided her with all she needed, and was always around, hoping to make Carla comfortable. He made no demands of her and left her when she grew antsy, knowing his presence sometimes agitated her. Samuel was happy knowing that Carla was there, and finally his bride. He thought he had a lifetime to help her fall in love with him, and knew he could break down the barriers that had surrounded the woman's heart after all she had been through, if she would only give him a chance. Carla, however, could not allow herself to soften towards Samuel. She knew that she had been the one who had made a bad decision, that it was her own fault she was now trapped in another marriage, and knew this was what she deserved. She'd had an affair, she'd planned to pass off another man's child as her husband's, and knew she had to pay the price. But she could not face that future. She felt like a slave, bought and sold, plotted for and captured, and could not work up enough enthusiasm now to pretend a lie she'd lived for so long already, even with the new husband. She resented Samuel, resented herself most of all, and resented a system that only allowed women to be treated as chattel. She stayed in her room most nights, refusing the few party invitations that came because of her pregnancy, and listened to the gramophone and sound discs Samuel had bought her as a wedding present. The music soothed her mind, and she daydreamed as the music played. She'd read books about faraway places that were always warm, Spain, Africa, India, and dreamed about life in those places. Carla's health declined as the days passed, and soon she would not even leave her bed, only staring out of her windows, longing for sunshine on her face as she listened to the many recordings Samuel brought her, trying to bring her out of her misery. Then the night came when Carla's pain started. Samuel quickly sent for a midwife and waited for 3 days, as Carla screamed through her labor. The child was caught somewhere between her slim hips, and would not be moved. Samuel paced and went in to see Carla as often as the midwife would allow, and towards the final day he refused to leave despite the protests of the midwife. His own wife was dying, and if the child was not soon born, both would die. Samuel thought on the matter, and quickly pushed the midwife out of the way. The woman obviously had no idea what she was doing, and Samuel thought he might know a way to ease his wife of her burden, even if it harmed the child. He would not allow Carla to die. Other children would come, if that's what she
censored.
But for now, he had to help her. Moving between Carla's legs, he gripped the child's legs as Carla's body tensed once more, trying to expel the baby from her body. Samuel pulled down on the baby's body, gently at first and then with more force. He could see it, tiny and lifeless looking with her head still inside of her mother's body. A girl, if Carla could deliver it. Samuel pulled again as another contraction started, Carla so exhausted she wasn't even conscious anymore. Slowly, with each contraction and Samuel's assistance, the child pulled free from Carla's body, and the midwife took over, cleaning the baby and Carla in turn. Samuel had time to see the baby's squashed and discolored face, and then he was forced out of the way. Samuel heard the child's cries as her air passages were cleared, and was relieved that the child lived. Now if only Carla would make some sound, stir in some way, he would be able to sleep at last. Samuel had not slept since Carla's travails had begun, and he was exhausted too but unwilling to sleep. Samuel turned to watch the midwife place the babe at her mother's,
censored,
but was saddened to see that Carla still did not move. The next day she was still not awake, and Samuel sent for a doctor he'd heard about. The doctor had been able to cure women of childbed fever, and Carla was obviously suffering from it now. He had the man sent for, and soon the short-statured, balding man with a mustache and monocle shuffled into Carla's chamber, looking the room over. Yes, we must have light, clean water that has been boiled then coiled, and a solution made with this chlorinated lime for me to clean your wife with. Have you a washing bowl where one can wash my hands to examine her? So many doctors now scoff at the suggestion that doctors should wash their hands, but this is how the infection is spread. I have seen it many times. Your wife will soon be better, Mr. Colebrook, if we can stop the infection. I'll soon have her walking around and cooing to that baby, just you wait and see. Dr. Weiss was an encouraging man, though small, and seemed to exude confidence that made a patient and their family members relax. Samuel sent for the boiled water and the means for Dr. Samuel Weiss to wash his hands, and watched as he tenderly examined Carla. He poured a powder mixture down her throat, telling Samuel that the medicine was not widely accepted, but that he used it on the few women that contracted the infection while in his hospital, and they were soon cured of the illness that threatened their lives. Samuel didn't care what the man fed to Carla, so long as he cured her. Samuel left once the doctor ordered the maids to change Carla's sheets for new ones, and informed them the sheets needed to be boiled to be sanitized, and went to check on the little butterfly that was his daughter. The child slept in his room, never far from him, and was quiet but putting on weight already with the help of a wet nurse. Carla was not producing enough milk to feed the child, so he'd had a woman capable of feeding the child sent for. She was angelic, asleep in her bassinet and the spitting image of Samuel. He was quite proud of his daughter, but unwilling to name her until her mother woke up. He called her his little butterfly, and gently brushed her cheek so that she would smile in her sleep, as she usually did. The baby calmly opened her eyes, smiled up at her father blearily, then went back to sleep, snuffling around for something to comfort her. Samuel picked her up and carried her into her mother's room. He often brought her into her mother, wanting her to know the woman when Carla finally awoke. He sat in a chair at Carla's bedside and watched the doctor as he went through his routine. Samuel smiled as the doctor looked up and reached for the child to examine her as well. Yes, the child is fine. Weak but all right so far. We'll keep an eye on her. She's had an ordeal as well, hasn't she? Keep her warm and fed, Mr. Colebrook, and she should be fine. Now your wife is quite ill. She will need a few days of treatment, but soon she should recover. From my examination, I would hazard a guess that she has not been rendered sterile, but that is always a possibility. Only time can truly tell. But she should recover from this birth, without any further problems, I'd wager. Thank you, Dr. Weiss. I am truly in awe of your knowledge and skill. Samuel extended a hand that wasn't holding the baby, and shook Dr. Weiss's hand. Be sure to have anyone that touches your wife clean their hands, Mr. Colebrook. That is most important. The child is well, nobody should touch her with unbathed hands. Now, I understand you pulled the babe free? That was very smart thinking, Mr. Colebrook, very smart indeed. Not many men can say they've delivered their own children. And to do it without killing the child. I'm not sure why the midwife did not think to do that, but I would not recommend her in the future. Hire someone else. She obviously does not know enough about childbirth to know unwashed hands are the leading cause of childbed fever. Now I will take my leave. I'll be back in the morning to administer more medicine to Mrs. Colebrook. Call around for me should Mrs. Colebrook deteriorate. I do not expect that though, so I will take my leave and get to my bed. Good night, Mr. Colebrook. Dr. Weiss headed to the door with his bag in hand. Thank you again, doctor. I love my wife dearly and her health is all that matters to me. I truly appreciate your efforts, Samuel said, and the doctor waved away his praise, telling him to get some rest before he became a patient as well. Samuel set up a pallet in the floor and slept by his wife's side for the next 2 nights. Finally, she awoke from her ordeal and looked around quietly. Carla could not place where she was or why she felt so bad. She reached down between her legs and felt that something had been placed there. She was sore there, and her stomach was quite sore as well. She tried to stand up but became dizzy as she sat up. Looking down at the floor, she saw a man there and screamed, having no idea who the man was but certain he should not be there. A maid ran in and the man jumped up from the floor. "Carla? You're awake. But why are you screaming, my love?" the handsome man asked her. Looking at the man in confusion, Carla spoke. "Who's Carla and who are you? Where am I? And what's happened to me? I feel as though I've been hit by a large wagon and as weak as a kitten. Have I been ill?" Chapter 3. Carla had no memory of her past, of her present, and had no idea who any of the people in what she was told was her home was. The man claiming to be her husband, Samuel, was handsome, but she had no memory of him. She'd obviously given birth to the child. Her body had been through some kind of ordeal after all, but she could not remember the pregnancy. She did not recognize the house, the servants, or even the street they lived on. She could not remember anything about her life before she woke up finally. Dr. Weiss informed Samuel it must have been from the trauma of the birth, or perhaps something had happened to her mind during the ordeal. He was not sure, and being a wise man would make no certain claims because he didn't have the means of finding out or the knowledge of the mind required to form an answer. He knew only that amnesia was possible, real, and that Carla was obviously suffering from it. Dr. Weiss told Samuel he did not know if Carla would recover, but had hope that she would, and that was all he could tell the worried husband. Carla was upset about not knowing anyone, but faced it with a stoic resignation and strength. She fed her child now that she'd recovered enough to produce milk, played with her, and loved her as fiercely as she could. They'd named the girl Chloe, though they both continued to call her Butterfly because she was so delicate and tiny. Carla also continued to heal over the coming weeks, and was now able to walk outside with her daughter in her arms and her husband by her side. As far as Carla knew, she had married Samuel for love. They'd had a long courtship, and had looked forward to the birth of their child with joy. She could not remember her melancholy, but sometimes she'd remember staring out of her window and a tune playing. She asked Samuel about the music, but he had no idea where she'd heard any of it, he told her. She didn't either, and soon dismissed the memories as her days were filled with relearning her husband and getting to know her child. Samuel knew he'd lied to Carla, but hoped if she ever regained her memory that she'd know now that he truly did love her and would forgive his untruths. They were happy, and Samuel and Carla were eager to share a bed together again, but the doctor refused to allow her to recommence her marital duties until she was completely healed. He did not want her to risk reintroducing the infection or do any damage to the healing tissue within her body. Samuel understood, but Carla seemed to be impatient, and she longed to be held in her husband's arms without their clothing in the way, and to feel his hands on her aching body. Carla had fallen in love with her husband over the weeks. His attentiveness to her needs was endearing, and he'd only leave her when he had to go into his office. Every time he left, he brought her and Chloe presents when he returned. They read books together, discussed what they'd read, discussed events in the newspapers, talked and laughed and played with their daughter. Their days were idles marred only by Samuel's trips into his office. She knew he belonged to a very rich steel production family, and that he had obligations to meet, so she did not complain. After all, his work provided for their family. Carla loved Samuel's laugh, the way his face would turn serious when they were having a debate on some matter, and how he always listened to her opinions. She did not think there was a freer woman in all of England, nor a happier one. Her marriage was perfect, and she was content. Then the doctor came and told Carla she could resume her marital duties after inspecting her, and Carla knew her wish was finally going to come true. She'd prepared for the day, purchasing some French lingerie she'd seen in a shop window on an outing with Chloe, and bathed, wanting her hair and body to smell nice, as well as following the doctor's order to maintain hygiene. He'd been most adamant about bathing and washing one's hands, to the point that even the staff members were insisting on cleanliness in their own homes. Carla had several candles lit in her husband's bedchamber, put on the lace nightgown and peignoir, had her husband's meal delivered to his room, closed the curtains at the window and waited. He was soon home, and stood in his bedroom door in awe at the stunning woman before him. Carla's dark brown hair rested gently at her exposed,
censored,
her cleavage on display above the dark red lace, and her body recovered from her ordeal. Her hips were still a bit plump, and there was a softness to her body where one might expect sharp angles, but that softness only enhanced her beauty. Samuel felt his body reacting to the sheer beauty of his wife, and knew he'd be missing dinner for a little while at least. He moved to the bed where Carla was stretched out, and touched a curl resting against her right.
censored,
Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and Samuel worried his attentions could harm her delicate health. Carla saw the concern mar his features, and brushed her hand across his forehead, wiping away the worry. "I'm fine, I will be fine, so don't worry, my darling, just love me, please? I need to know what I've been missing all these weeks. I don't remember this part of our past either, and I feel like a schoolgirl, so nervous and excited, like it's my first time all over again. I hope I can please you," she whispered to him, nervousness making her voice shake. "It will be perfect, Carla, just like you. I only hope I can please you. I'm nervous as well." He
censored,
her then, his full lips resting gently against her own. Carla enjoyed the feel of his lips pressed against hers, and opened her own to take a breath. She was shocked when Samuel softly pressed his
censored,
between her lips, apparently taking her movement as an invitation, but accepted his intrusion. She slid her
censored,
along his own, unaware of what she should do but following her own instincts. Samuel encouraged her exploration, with a groan and a tightening of his fist in her hair. Samuel's movement did not hurt Carla, she rather felt she had a power that she did not know she possessed when his hand tensed in her hair. She enjoyed the feeling the sound gave her, the pleasure that came from her insides tensing, and knowing that she'd made him make that noise. She wanted to do it again, but was unsure of what else to do. Instinct told her to touch him, and she reached out a hand, cupping his face as he
censored.
her.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
"I love you, Samuel. I will love you for eternity if you'll let me," Carla whispered to him. "That's all I've ever wanted, my dove, my peace. I only ever wanted your love. I will love you for eternity as well. And our little Chloe. Our little miracle. I will love you both for the rest of my life." His words ended on a gentle snore, and Carla smiled as she settled down to her first night in her husband's arms. Well, the first night she remembered, at least. The next day, Samuel moved his family to the country estate that had been in his family for generations now. He wanted to remove her from any polite society members that might want to gawk at the child or her, now that she was healed, who could reveal the truth to her. She still did not know she'd been married previously, and he'd refused all visitors, having the butler keep all of the mail for his inspection only. Samuel wrote to Carla's family, informing them she was still too ill for visitors, and refused all invitations for the family. He was starting to feel guilty about his deception, and wondered if he could keep up the lies, but lived in fear that Carla would leave him and that their ideal life would end. Carla loved the country home, and he hoped that would be enough to keep her from wondering why they had no visitors. One person refused to take Samuel's avoidance anymore, and decided to make her way to the estate, where her servants had learned the family had retired to. She arrived one morning when Samuel was out riding, hoping to see the child that could possibly be her grandchild. Beatrice had thought over past events, and suspected that she may have been duped by Elizabeth Rogers. She knew herself that Carla had received no correspondence from the woman because she collected the mail each day, and knew that Carla had never been seen in public with the woman. Perhaps she'd been too hasty in throwing Carla out. She dismissed her guilt by reassuring herself she'd been distraught over her son's death and felt the need to claim the child that could only possibly be his. Surely Henry had broken Carla enough. Beatrice herself had heard the young woman's screams, that adultery would not have crossed his young wife's mind. Determined to claim the child as a debenham and take it home with her, Beatrice had traveled into the country to collect it. Beatrice wasn't even sure if the child was a boy or a girl, but at this point she did not care. She only wanted the child to fill her empty life. Stepping out of the vehicle, Beatrice walked up to the front door and opened it, not even bothering to knock. She walked around the house looking for the family, finally finding them as she walked into the sitting room. The large picture window revealed Carla on a blanket, playing with the baby on her lap, a nurse nearby on a white painted metal chair ready to take over should Carla grow tired. Samuel was not there, which should make taking the baby from Carla easier, Beatrice thought, as she found a door to the back garden. Walking out to the family, Beatrice was unaware of the events surrounding Chloe's birth, and was confused when Carla, rather than showing fear, smiled and offered up a hello. "Hello, Carla, I've come to collect the child." Beatrice spoke coldly and with assurance, barely glancing at the child. "Pardon me? Collect the child? Who do you think you are?" Carla asked as she gathered the baby to her. "I'm its grandmother, and I'm here to take it home. That's what its father would want. Please don't make a scene." Beatrice was so certain the child was a debenham, she didn't even bother to look at it. "You aren't Chloe's grandmother, I can assure you of that. Her grandmother is dead, my husband can vouch for that. And you obviously aren't my mother, I know that as well. So tell me again, why should I hand over my child to you? In fact, nurse, call a footman and have this lady removed from the property. She's obviously unbalanced." Carla turned back to the baby, setting her in her pram and making to move past the unbalanced woman in her garden. But the woman grabbed the pram, pulling back the cover to reveal little Chloe inside. The child was the spitting image of her father, from her delicate nose to her full lips, and Beatrice knew that Henry could not be this child's father. Samuel must be. "You whore. How dare you try to pass this child off as a debenham? I'm glad I kicked you out after Henry died now. You broke your marriage vows and betrayed him with his best friend. Have you no class, no breeding at all?" The woman was enraged and raised the umbrella she'd brought with her, knocking Carla over the head with it. Carla fell under the woman's deranged wrath and hit her head against a metal point on the chair, knocking herself senseless. She awoke moments later to see a footman escorting the woman, while Samuel held his wife in his arms, carrying her up to the house. Unlike the last time she'd awoken from being unconscious, she knew who her husband was, knew who he'd been all along, and knew that Samuel had lied to her. She could guess why he'd lied to her, but his lies felt like a betrayal of her trust. She'd lost her freedom again, and now he'd betrayed the unquestioning trust she'd given him. There was no going back from that. "Samuel, I'm fine, put me down please," Carla asked quietly. "No, darling, I'm taking you to our room. Chloe is safe and Beatrice is being escorted home, you're safe now," Samuel said, placing a
censored
on her head. "No. Put me down now," Carla demanded. Samuel was confused about her angry tone, but did as she demanded. "What did she say to you, my dove?" "It's all lies, I promise you," Samuel assured her. No, they weren't lies. You see, dear husband, I can remember it all now. Every last detail of my life has been revealed to me. Down to the very lies you told me. I understand why you did it, but you lied. Very big lies, and I simply won't have it. You have to go. You've betrayed me, and the damage cannot be undone. You have to go." The cold, defeated look in her eyes told Samuel that all was lost, and he quietly walked away, knowing that now was not the time to argue his case. Carla went to her room and cuddled her baby, the only good thing to come from the mess she'd made of her life. She'd only wanted to build a home for herself, some kind of security, and to end Henry's torture and experiments meant to get her pregnant. Instead, she'd somehow turned her life into a shambles. It could not go on this way. She would live under no man's thumb or with his lies. She could do this with or without Samuel, and for now her choice was without. Chapter 4. Carla panicked as Chloe's skin grew redder, and the heat coming from her tiny body increased. Samuel had been gone for 2 months, leaving quietly the night of Beatrice's visit, and she had no idea who to call to help her. Chloe's nurse had no more solutions to try, and Carla knew her child was growing more ill by the hour. Carla sent the nurse for the nearest doctor, and a note with a footman to Samuel. The doctor arrived, looked Chloe over and told him there was nothing he could do. The baby was going to die, and she needed to prepare herself. The doctor then left, leaving Carla distraught and in tears. Carla cradled little Chloe to her stomach, knowing that within the confines of her body Chloe's little brother or sister slept, and that she should have called Samuel back sooner. She decided to try again with her husband, realizing after she calmed down and spent some time alone, that life with Samuel had been much different than life with Henry. Samuel's gentleness, his
censored
to only make her happy, was the exact opposite of Henry, who'd only ever seen Carla as a producer of children, not as a human being. She also realized she loved her husband dearly, and that life without him was just plain not worth living. She'd written the letter asking him to come back, she'd just not sent it yet. Now he'd come back, but not know that she'd wanted him back anyway. And there may not be time for him to say goodbye to Chloe. Clutching the child even tighter to her body, Carla prayed that Samuel would show up in time to see their little butterfly on her way. Hoping it would cool Chloe's frightfully hot skin, Carla immersed her child in cool water, even more frightened when Chloe did not react to the water's chill. She bathed the child there, and slowly she felt Chloe's skin cooling but not much. Hearing a strange noise, Carla went over to the window, holding the baby, and saw what she assumed was one of the motorized wagons she'd read about but hadn't seen yet. She saw Samuel and Dr. Weiss, and could barely contain herself as she awaited their approach. The vehicle moved quickly, and they were soon at the door and up the stairs. "Quickly, get her back into the water," Dr. Weiss spoke, as he saw Chloe and the large basin Carla had been bathing her in. He prepared 2 separate medicines for Chloe with water Carla had prepared, and spoon-fed the mixtures to the baby. Soon Chloe's fever went down, and her color began to return to normal. Dr. Weiss had been tense, but as Chloe's skin cooled even more, he relaxed. "She should be fine now. I will stay with her for the next few days, if you can accommodate me, that is, to give her the medicine and in case the fever returns. Now get some rest, Mum. If I'm not mistaken, you have another one on the way, and you're going to need your strength after your last ordeal." Dr. Weiss spoke to Carla gently, a hand tapping against one of Carla's own. "How did you know?" Carla asked, looking over at Samuel, who appeared to be in shock. "A doctor knows. Now go rest and speak with your husband. I think you two have some things to discuss." He spoke gently. Samuel followed Carla out of the room, his mouth moving but unable to form words, as he was not exactly sure what he wanted to say to his wife first. Carla beat him to it and dragged him to their former bedroom, pulling his mouth down to hers as he shut the door. She pulled his clothes off one piece at a time, not caring if buttons popped loose, she'd repair them later. She tore her own clothes off, giggling as lace wrenched free from cloth, and her hairpins fell all over the floor. Chloe was going to be fine. Samuel was here at last, and he was accepting her attentions. They could talk later. Carla moved her mouth from Samuel's lips and pulled him to their bed. She hadn't slept in here since he left, but it had been kept clean. She fell back onto the bed, pulling her
censored
husband with her. There was no time for foreplay, no time for sweet words. She just needed life-affirming confirmation that she was still alive, that he was still alive, that their baby was still alive. Lovemaking.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
"I want you to stay, Samuel, but I need you to let me say this," she said. "Go on, my dove," Samuel encouraged. "I wrote a letter to you, but I haven't sent it yet. I wanted to make sure it was right. Then Chloe grew ill, and there was so little time. I was so afraid you weren't going to make it, and I realized what I'd stolen from you both, from you and our child. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if she'd." Carla broke off, a sob closing her throat. Samuel
censored
the top of her head, soothing Carla. "She's fine, darling. Go on. Well, I realize that I love you, that you've loved me this whole time, and though you lied, you did it out of love. Which is still no excuse, but it's one I'll forgive this time. But only this time. Oh, darling, my life without you has been so empty. I need you in it. Please say you'll come home. I would give everything I own to come back to you and Chloe. Carla, you don't even have to ask. But I am concerned about this baby. It's too late now, but what if this makes you ill?" Samuel's fear made his voice tremble. We'll have to face that, darling. Hopefully Dr. Weiss will continue to be an innovative doctor, and he'll get us all through this. Not every birth is the same. Chloe's birth was so hard because she was turned the wrong way, her legs came out first. This next baby may be easier, especially if it comes out head first. The child will move through my body easier. I'm worried too, but if we live our lives too worried to experience what life is actually about, we'll not be living at all. We'll be hermits, lost to the world and sheltered away. We're going to have a hard enough time with my own troubles marring our family life. Let's not bother with more worry than we have to, all right, darling? Carla asked, looking up at her husband with her love once again on full display. We'll take it day by day, my love. I guess that's how we're going to have to take it. But I have faith in Dr. Weiss, in you, in us. We can get through this, we can get through it all. After all, nothing else matters in the end but you, me, and our children. Love is all that matters in the end, and we have more love than most people in this world. And that's all we really need. Samuel whispered the last words to his wife as he brushed her hair from her face and
censored
her once more, home at last, both of them free from their burdens to love each other at last. Thank you for reading my book. If you like this story, I think you'll enjoy my author friend's book, Dark Desire. A big favor to ask. I would really love it if you could take a few seconds to leave me a review. Thank you so much in advance. About the author. Selina Coffey is a romance writer who lives happily in London with her husband and son. She is a hopeless romantic who grew up always believing in love, and she is not ashamed to admit this. It is this belief that makes her so passionate about writing crazy love stories. A stereotypical girly girl, she loves shopping. So whenever she gets a chance and the spare cash, you will probably find her browsing online for the next pair of shoes to add to her collection. You can find her online at www.selinacoffey.com. Contact her at hello@selinacoffey.com. Closing credits. This has been Being Desired. Written by Selina Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Copyright 2024 by Lovey Books Limited. Production copyright 2024 by Lovey Books Limited.